This is The Comms Exchange, a podcast by 3090 Marketing. Each episode, we sit down with colleagues, leaders, and changemakers to share stories and lessons from the field of community and economic development. Together, we explore how communications shapes strategy, builds trust, and drives momentum, because every project, every partnership, every breakthrough begins the same way, with a conversation. Welcome to the Comms Exchange, where we explore the people and ideas that are shaping how we build, connect, and communicate. I'm Rachel Ledet.
And I'm Christianne Brunini. Today, we're talking with someone who sits at the crossroads of policy, politics, and the future of affordable housing. She's one of the clearest voices advocating for the low-income housing tax credit, the LIHTC, the engine behind most of all rental housing being built today.
Emily Cadik leads the Affordable Housing Tax Credit Coalition, and she spent her entire career navigating federal policy, building coalitions, and pushing for resources that communities vitally need. She cut her teeth at HUD, shaped national policy at Enterprise, and now runs the coalition that carries the banner for LIHTC.
She's also a woman leading in a space that's deeply technical, deeply political, and still heavily male. We're excited to talk about her work, her leadership path, and the very human side of advancing good housing policy.
Emily, welcome to the Comms Exchange. You've become one of the national authorities on LIHTC, and we just are so happy to have you on the show today.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. Very glad to be here.
What is the most honest assessment of where the credit stands right now, politically, economically, emotionally, within the industry?
Politically, the low-income housing tax credit has never been stronger. I've been advocating for the program since 2012, and we spent the first few years of that making incremental changes. Then we were playing defense, trying to prevent the elimination of the credit and the elimination of private activity bonds, which of course finance roughly half of all housing credit properties, back in 2017. Now, having just returned from the major industry conference, AHF Live, it was amazing to be in a place where the conversation was about what are we going to do with all of these credits we just got, and making sure we have the investor demand to match, whereas it was less than 10 years ago that we were just trying to save the program. So having just had this huge expansion, obviously this is a year of some adjustments in the market, but not only is the housing credit being viewed as the engine of economic growth and driver of housing, but housing affordability has become something that every member of Congress, every part of the political spectrum is hearing about and cares about. We just saw a huge investment in the program from the Republican side of the aisle, whereas some of our wins in the past had been more driven by Democrats. So we've got this really rare program in DC where we do have this bipartisan support. We did get a major investment in the program, even while a lot of other popular programs have been cut in recent months. There's a lot of competing pressures. So politically, I'm really proud of what we built. And I've even been talking to other groups that represent other interests who've now been approaching us saying, how'd you pull this off? Because it is pretty rare. It's huge on its face, and it's huge in the context of what we've done. Obviously, we do need to work on some of these things. Just because we had a huge win this year doesn't mean we're done here. So there's both unfinished business that we've been trying to get done for years, and then also some of these new things that we're starting to talk about to help support the investor base. But I feel more optimistic that whereas it was 5 years since our last win until we had this one, I don't think it's going to be 5 years until our next
one. What an incredible position to be in. And I'm so proud of you and so excited for you. I know that was a huge, huge win. I was sweating for you, sending in all the emails that I could and calling all the people. So excited
Thank
about
you.
this.
It took a lot of people over a lot of years, and we appreciate everyone who weighed in.
Yeah, for sure. You've spent your whole career in housing policy, HUD, Enterprise, now the coalition. What originally drew you to the space, and when did it actually feel like home?
I love the second part of your question because I think the first part of what drew me in, I wish I had a better villain origin story, but I fell into affordable housing like a lot of people did. But I think like a lot of people did, yeah, now I'm a lifer. So I was finishing up graduate school. I knew I wanted to do something that had to do with helping to address poverty. I applied for the Presidential Management Fellowship, which was recently canceled, but I used to, for many years, was a government initiative to get young people coming out of grad school into federal jobs. So this was in 2009 during the recession. It was also an exciting time to be in DC because DC was hiring and the rest of the country wasn't. And so I thought coming down to work on policy after getting my policy degree was a dream for me. And so I really narrowed it down to which of the federal agencies aligned with generally what I wanted to do, but I had no housing background or really no specific plan to go into housing. And I ended up getting my first fellowship placement in the moving to work office at HUD, which was a really great first job because there are these moving to work agencies all over the country. And I got to go out and visit them. I wasn't even old enough at the time to rent a car without the special waiver, but I got to go visit, see what public housing looked like in Baltimore versus Seattle versus Boulder, Colorado, Lawrence, Kansas, New Haven. I mean, really diverse parts of the country, types of cities, and all of that. And so I felt really lucky that I got that exposure and also realized this was a field that is, A, important and life-changing, but B, that there were very few young people in it. So I guessed, and I suppose rightly guessed, that this was a place where young people could have an impact in a relatively reasonable amount of time. So I knew I wanted to stay in housing. I realized that advocacy was really where I wanted to pursue, less so on kind of program administration. And so that's when I went over to enterprise. Actually, I did a rotation while I was at HUD to intergovernmental affairs when they were rolling out the rental assistance demonstration. So that was really interesting and exciting. And then realized I kind of wanted to do more of that. So went over to enterprise and was there for 6 years. And I was on the board of the Tax Credit Coalition and eventually started running it. And as for when it felt like home, that's such a good question. I will say one of the moments I got really bought in was when I was visiting one of the public housing authorities that had recently been admitted to the moving to work demonstration. And so they were really trying to roll out the red carpet for their first HUD visit with their new designation. And they put together this 3-ring binder with each page was a story of a family that was living in one of their units. And they were all handwritten stories. There were photos of kids. And, here I was a couple years into my first job and just pawing through this. I had to put it down because I didn't want to start crying in the meeting, but it was so meaningful. And to think, sometimes when you're looking at different programs, it feels dry, it feels arcane. We're talking about, CFR, this and that. But then when you get to actually get closer to those stories and have people say my life changed because I moved in here, that's what keeps me grounded and kind of, it's exciting to work with all the people we do in the industry and to have big wins, but that's really why we do it.
The affordable housing community is truly special. Everybody really falls into it by accident, at least this generation of affordable housing specialists. But once you're in there, it is a huge family and it's so much heart. So really a unique place to be. So happy to have been part of it and still be part of it, just in a different way.
And I totally concur with the idea of storytelling on the family side. And Christianne and I are working on a campaign right now locally in Louisiana to really showcase families. We actually just did a spotlight on a teen who came through one of the workforce development programs, and his family lives in an affordable housing complex. And just painting the picture of what really happens in people's lives and that they're real people and that there's these wonderful entrepreneurial success stories that come out of some of them. And I think breaking it down into the real person and the real families is such a big part of what helps the campaigns for making these whole programs work. So I think that's the same thing that tugs at all of our hearts. And so that part of your story is easy to understand because of seeing that binder and how many people should see that binder. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So my next question, you went from a more policy role to leading this national coalition. What did that transition require from you as a leader that might have surprised you?
Yeah, it was certainly a big leap. One thing that did prepare me for the role is when I was at Enterprise, I was helping to co-chair the Action Campaign, which is the big tent coalition of all the associations and individual groups that advocate for the housing credits. The herding cats part was less new to me. We had really cut our teeth during the 2017 tax reform and trying to save the credit and bonds, really all singing from the same songbook and figuring out what it takes to get people to sing from the same songbook. So that part did prepare me well. Leading a national organization, though, I think one thing that I continue to learn is just balancing all of the different needs of the different constituencies and recognizing that different groups might be more excited about one policy or another, but bringing them all along regardless of who's getting their top issue addressed this year versus who's going to wait for the next one because they understand maybe this other issue needs to get addressed first. So I think that's something that everyone who leads a large coalition grapples with, that you can't please everyone at all times, but if you can earn their trust and get them to see that we can deliver these results, it helps really bring them along, even if different groups may not think that they are aligned on many things.
Did you have a mentor who inspired you along this path? Somebody who was helping guide you and help balance you a little, if you will?
Yeah, I have a lot of mentors, and I had a lot of people who believed in me when I was stepping into this role pretty early in my career. I'll name a couple. Michael Gaber was the board president when I came on to lead the coalition, and we were really going through a whole reset of the coalition at that time. So a lot of the things about running a business that were new to me, he was incredibly helpful in helping me figure out. Like you said, I had more of a policy role before, but here we were finalizing a budget, bringing on consultants, finding a new office, staffing up, all these things at once that were really new to me from, where I had spent my time earlier in the career. Obviously, I really appreciated many of the women who came before me, since there were very few when I started. I think it's getting a little better. Definitely seen more women at all the industry events, but when I first started, there was probably closer to 10% at some of the meetings I went to. And so really respected some of the women who'd been around for a while, like Ronnie Thielen and Diana McIver, who really, Beth Storr, kind of broke ground in their different parts of the industry. I've also always had Michael Novogradec on my executive committee, and he's just so well respected, not only with what they do with their business, but being involved with policies. So I learned a lot from him as well. But generally speaking, I feel lucky that there were a lot of people who put their faith in me and were really rooting for me. And were willing to help out whenever I needed it. So I'm still collecting mentors every day.
You touched on it a little bit. We're both involved in the Women's Affordable Housing Network, and so that increases the number of women that are in our sphere and are touching this industry. This world of development, tax policy, real estate finance, it's still skewing male. What have you learned about being a woman in the room where these decisions are getting made?
Yeah, well, like I said, I think it's getting better. I feel like it's something I'm less conscious of day to day than I was when I started, and especially when I started leading a coalition. But little things still happen. I was actually thinking about our conversation today when I was at a lunch earlier, where someone was telling me about an event. We were talking about if it's a worthwhile one to go to. And he said, yeah, it's a pretty easy one to sell to your boss because, and he told me why I would be able to sell going to this event to my boss. I go, well, okay, I'll be sure to tell my boss. Yeah. So, but that some of these things you never know, is the assumption because you're a woman or because you're young. It could be either way. And I'm sure he didn't think that deeply about it. But it's never. There's these little things that make you pause sometimes. I don't know if they'll ever go away, but I do think, and maybe it's just because I've gone to so many conferences every year that people know me more. So I'm feeling less conscious of some of those, I guess, gender issues that I was more aware of earlier on. Yeah, I would still love to see some more diversity in the industry on all fronts. And I think, having the diversity makes our advocacy stronger. Having different messengers, different backgrounds, all of that helps. So I hope for the day where we don't have to have some of these conversations anymore.
Sure.
Thank you for sharing that. From your vantage point, what resonates with lawmakers? Do you find in your experience, is it data? Is it personal storytelling? Is it economic impact? What are some of the things that you think really helps to shift conversation when you are having challenging conversations to sway opinions that might not be originally in your favor?
Yeah, we have always been really emphasizing the importance of getting members of Congress out to see the housing credit properties, which is really the gold standard of getting them converted, because it's not only getting them to see the proverbial binder of stories, they're actually getting to meet the residents, but also to see the properties are in many cases not what they thought of. And they're imagining Cabrini Green, and it turns out, oh, I didn't realize that new apartment building on the corner is actually affordable, or that used to be a dilapidated school that that corner was run down, and now look at it and it's this really nice facility. So I think getting them out there is really the best thing. Obviously you can't get every member out, or especially if they're not willing, and congressional schedules and things like that. And even if you get the members out, there's the constant churn of staff. So I don't know if we'll ever be in a world where every member of Congress and all of their staff have gone out to see housing credit property, but we sure keep at it. And then, for when you can't do that, I think it's really valuable to have constituents come in and share that kind of information. So when we have our members come in for fly-ins, we have them share things like, here's a handout that shares what this development is and some of the resident stories. So it's not the same as physically being there, but in many cases it can be the next best thing. And if they're hearing about it from home, that carries a lot of weight. A lot of them are data driven, so we always bring in the stats. The Action Campaign has great impact statistics on what the housing credit has done in every congressional district. They love that. So it's really, you never know what's going to land with any given member. So learning what you can about the member, making it local, and trying to appeal to all of the pillars of the stool is very helpful.
One of the great things about working with Christianne is that she is an event expert on getting the right people in the room when stakeholders like local leaders, legislators need to see the thing. And so there is no greater case study than walking through the halls and saying, wow, this is really nice. I'd like to live here. And so one of the things that I've learned in working with her is just taking these milestone moments to celebrate the parts of these developments, especially when they're rehabs. Like you said, in New Orleans, we have old schools that are just sitting, and where developers can come in and help these housing authorities make them into these jewels is just hard to imagine unless you're there. And so that's something that we're trying to perpetuate that really does help advocacy, because there is no greater brochure than walking through. And I think that is so important for advocacy and letting people walk the halls. So my next question is about advocacy. If there's something that you would like other people to know about advocating for a cause like this, what is sort of a tip to understand about advocacy work?
I would hope everyone understands they have the product. We in DC who lobby, I don't build affordable housing. I have no developments to show a member of Congress, but developers do and the owners do. And so while we can go around, and many of us do, there's a lot of us lobbying on behalf of affordable housing in DC, the showcasing the properties is really the responsibility of everybody in this industry. We just had a huge expansion of the program. Bring your member of Congress out and say thank you. Did they vote for it? Did they not vote for it? Who cares? They like taking credit for it anyway. Tell them this is what the expansion of low-income housing tax credit did in our community. Look at these people who have homes in your district because of it. Christianne was saying she, was sending all the letters. Everybody needs to do that, because there's a lot of meetings I have in DC where they say this all makes sense to us, but we're not hearing about it from home. So we can't do that. I can't change my email signature and say now I live in Mississippi and and do that. So it doesn't have to be complicated. It could just be a simple, I'm reaching out as a constituent to urge you to support the low-income housing tax credit. Copy me. I'll fill in the details, or reach out to me beforehand, or any of us who work on the housing credit. I just don't want anyone to be either intimidated or think that it's already taken care of because there are national advocates doing it, because it has to be paired with the local advocacy. And that's the only way that we got the expansion that we did.
Yeah, I do a lot of thinking about how when affordable housing developers are building their pro forma, there's a space there for the lawyer, there's a space there for the architect. And rarely, if ever, is there a marketing budget that makes it through the contingency period, right? It'll usually get reabsorbed. And if there was a stronger amount put towards that marketing budget that really applies to the community outreach, helping people understand why this is here, inviting the policymakers into the process to see it from start to finish, that we wouldn't be fighting so hard to get these changes made. So that's my plug. I hope anybody's listening and is working on their pro forma and puts a bigger line item there for it, because I think it would make a lot of difference.
Absolutely.
You and I have shared a lot of chicken dinners together. I know when I just first started working in affordable housing, and I would see you up there on the stage and you were so smart and polished. And it was so cool when I finally got to sit next to you and meet you as a person and kind of peek behind the curtain. But I know you are on the road all the time. You're on panels. You're making sure that everybody knows what the coalition is doing, what's happening on the Hill, keeping everybody informed. But that's a lot of miles on your itinerary, and it's a lot of pressure on you. How do you manage to keep balance in the midst of all of that?
You know, I kind of started to miss conference chicken during COVID. Something about it, you know? Well, it's like what you said earlier, it's a family. And so, it is a lot of miles. It is a lot of, waking up in hotels and remembering, where am I again today? But I get to see people, not only people who have now become my friends at these events, but also meet people who can really help us. And there's a lot of you in going to these events and supporting our efforts. So one that I use as an example all the time, which you were there for, was going out to the Louisiana Affordable Housing Conference. And at the time, I remember having a slide up there saying no member of the Louisiana delegation has ever supported the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act.
Yeah.
And we identified who the top targets were. And now we've got Senator Cassidy is on. Same thing. We did the same thing in Mississippi. Both Mississippi senators are on. And I think sometimes it's just being there in front of a captive audience. And then people come up to you after and say, oh, my daughter plays soccer with Senator so-and-so's son. Do you want me to reach out? Well, yeah, I do, actually. And so I think it's sort of getting past that tragedy of the commons that we talked about, where people think, okay, well, they're advocating for it. And we are. But unless you ask, you being person who lives in their state or district, it's not going to be as important to them. So I see a lot of value in going out, meeting the people, letting them know, I'm not asking you to get every single member, even of your congressional delegation on. Can we just focus on these couple? So that's been a huge value of going around the country. But yeah, it's exciting to hear what people are thinking, especially in just coming back from AHF Live right after we had this huge expansion. Great opportunity to say, what is the buzz in the industry now that we had this huge change? Or after an election, how's everybody thinking about the policy landscape? What's everyone thinking about the corporate tax rate, as of a few years ago? So I like hearing what's going on. And I also just like being around a lot of smart people who care about things.
I love that answer.
So we are going to conclude our session today with a few rapid fire questions. We like to just throw some fun things out at you. No right or wrong answers. And so just give us your top of mind thoughts. Number one, what's one myth about LIHTC that you'd like to erase?
I have an easy answer for that one. This myth bothered me so much, we commissioned our own research to dispute it, which I'm still trying to get kind of in front of more people as we push back on this. But the claim is that it's just developers or investors who are benefiting from the housing credit, and that the benefit does not actually flow to the residents. And I think part of the reason that misperception has stuck around so long is that the data is really at the property level for how much tenants are saving compared to market. So we did a study of LIHTC rents versus market rents in quite a few of the large metro areas around the US to find out how much lower the LIHTC rents actually are. And it's close to like $6,000-7,000 a year that it's in people's pockets. So it's interesting seeing members of Congress kind of promoting some other legislation and saying, our bill is saving the American family $1,000 or something. I'm sort of surprised they're not latching on to this more to say, this is huge, especially in this era where affordability is now a buzzword, which it certainly wasn't when I started doing this. So that helps us a lot. But to have some data showing how much families are actually saving from the housing credit is something I hope both at the national level and at the property level we can dispute.
Okay, so the next question is about branding. But if you could change the name of affordable housing or the LIHTC, the low income housing tax credit, what would you call it so that everybody would embrace it? Because attainable just doesn't get it, does it?
I know. Well, our coalition is called the Affordable Housing Tax Credit Coalition, so I think affordable housing tax credit would would roll off the tongue nicely. There is actually a provision in the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act to rename the program. I don't think that's become anyone's top priority, but I do think renaming it might help not only nationally, but at some community meetings too.
Sure. Ooh, I didn't know about that. I'm going to dig into that. I want to be part of that rebrand.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share that with you.
Okay, so last question is one thing that you wish real estate developers understood better about capital.
I wish that people understood how difficult it is to get anything passed because we have bills out there, especially in the tax space. There hasn't been a major tax bill until this one for 5 years, really. Or there was well, anyways, there hasn't been a tax bill in a long time. And so in the wake of the major expansion we had this year, we've really been focusing on a thank you tour because our political capital tank is empty. We had such a huge win. But I have been surprised every conference I go to, people are coming up to me and saying, okay, so are we going to shorten the credit period? Are we going to get individual investors into the market? And these really big changes to the program that within just a couple months of this huge win. And so it's part of my job to manage the expectations, but I do wish some would understand that it is extremely difficult to accomplish something like what we did. And so not to say we can't do anything for a while, but we're going to have to be pretty deliberate about what we ask for, read the room, be grateful to our champions who even members of Congress blew a lot of political capital for the program too. So just being careful about how we approach our wish list.
And I'm going to ask one more question, even though it wasn't written there, because I just love talking to you. You've talked about all the travel that you're doing for work, but I happen to know that you also love personal travel. So is there anything on your wish list or any recent trip that helps fill your cup?
Well, I'm glad you asked with my favorite topic. I had a goal of visiting 40 countries before I turned 40, which happened a few months ago. So this summer, I racked up my last few, and I'd been talking about it for so long. When I pulled into the 40th, it was exciting to think, oh, I actually did this. And I had a lot of fun going through the photos from all of the other countries I'd been to and picking some favorites from each and sharing those with people. I love travel. I think it helps me keep perspective and also have fun. And so I had a great summer and planned for some fun things after we had our huge legislative win. And now that I've achieved my goal, the world is kind of my oyster now that I'm not trying to achieve this specific goal. So if anyone has any travel recommendations for where I go next, I'm more open than I've been in a little while.
Well, we can talk offline about that. I'm sure I have lots of ideas for you.
Love that.
Well, thank you for your time. It's been so generous for you to sit with us today. And I know the work that you do is just invaluable. So we just want to thank you for that. And thank you for visiting.
Thank you. It's been a fun conversation. I appreciate your role in thinking through branding and advocacy. And I know once we all as an industry decide where we're going to go next here, that I know you'll be part of it. So I want to thank you for that as well.
Thank you.
Before we go, can you share where our listeners can find out more about the coalition online?
Yes, taxcreditcoalition.org.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here today. You've been a pleasure. Have a great rest of your week. And please stay in touch with us as all these wonderful things continue and you have more travel stories to share.
Well, likewise. Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to The Comms Exchange, a podcast by 3090 Marketing. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please be sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss out on an exciting new episode. We'll be back soon with more stories and strategies from the field, because every breakthrough begins with a conversation.